This is the first in the series of 10 videos on the Yama Niyama of Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, the eight-limbed path of yoga. According to Patanjali, these are the first limbs, the first things that you undertake when you start the yoga practice, or perhaps more than that, if we don't look at the eight limbs as a chronological practice, they are the principles that underpin and inform the rest of the practice. They are the principles in the spirit of which we undertake the rest of our practice. Patanjali's Yoga Sutra exists within a scriptural tradition that loves lists. And these lists are composed in not any old order. They put the most important of the elements always at the beginning, or maybe at the end. And so within Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, eight-limbed yoga, the first of the practices is yama, the moral restraints or observances. And the first of those is Ahiṃsā, non-violence. And so that necessarily implies that Ahiṃsā is the most important, and the main commentator Vyasa actually states that Ahiṃsā is then the root of all the other yamas. Another commentator, Vijnana Bhikshu, describes it in a cool way. He says that as the footprints of an elephant cover the footprints of all other creatures, so does Ahiṃsā cover all the other yamas. It means that a non-violent approach is essential to everything that you're going to do in the yama practice, in the moral practice, the ethical practice, but also everything else you're going to do within the yogic context. So let's dive in and actually see what Ahiṃsā really means. So Ahiṃsā, it comes from the word hinsa, which means harm, and then you've got the prefix a, which doesn't exactly mean not, it kind of means other than. So you could understand Ahiṃsā as non-violence or non-harming, but in a way, as we'll see, that can be a little bit limiting, because it doesn't just mean abstaining from violence. We want to see that it's going to mean cultivating the opposite. So we know already, we've looked at this before in the videos, that karma is central to the yogic worldview, understanding that cause and effect are central to how we got to where we are. And in that context, Ahiṃsā is going to be key, because if you want to cultivate a harmonious life for yourself, which leads ultimately to liberation, you're going to want to put harmonious behavior out into the world. Violence comes back to you. I love the example where, if you think about like a conversation with people, if you whisper or if you speak compassionately, if you have a calm demeanor, then the people talking to you are more likely to answer in a calm demeanor. Whereas if you yell at someone, they're only going to yell it back at you, and it just, the violence adds to each other, and it grows and grows and grows. And that's one aspect of it. But as with karma, like, I don't like to think of karma as a spiritual boomerang where, what you do is going to come and back at you at some sort of karmic retribution. I like to think of it more kind of psychologically, where when you act in a certain way, it leaves an impression on you and it changes you to the effect that what comes to you and the way that you behave further is going to be slightly different. When we behave violently, our nervous system goes into fight or flight, we actually change, and it's more likely to bring about further violent behavior or like the consequences of such. So how do we then cultivate or practice Ahiṃsā? So as I said in the yama introduction, all of these yamas can be practiced from gross to subtle. There's going to be a more concrete and obvious way of practicing it. And then when you get more established in that, it's going to lead you inwards to more and more subtle ways of looking at or subtle ways of understanding how this principle is playing out within you. So the first and more obvious ones is like, not physically hurting people, not killing, not being violent, being against war, things like that. Vegetarianism is actually very important. The commentators to the Yoga Sutra actually talk about not harming any living creature, understanding that it is almost impossible to avoid harming even tiny living entities like bacteria or insects. But nevertheless, you must strive as far as possible to avoid harming even an insect. So obviously eating other living things is kind of off the menu, so to speak. But ahimsa is not limited to these concrete acts of violence or non-violence, but also when you start to look inside, what is the root of that? Anger, emotional harm, harsh, cruel ways of speaking to people, impatience, and a brutal attitude. Invariably, physical violence is actually the result of violent thinking. So having an aggressive and a separatist attitude to the world, where you think of yourself as alone and you're defensive against everything else around you. And so when you start to look at it in that way, you understand that ahimsa, okay, it's a practice of love and compassion for the people around you. But you can't really do that if you don't have love and compassion within your own inner realm. If you're at war with yourself, you're going to feel always like you have to defend yourself against other people. You're not going to feel strong enough in you to be able to hold space for other people's emotions. And you're not going to be able to tolerate even the slightest change in your circumstances. And so you're going to act out to try and defend yourself. So as I understand it, and this is how it's kind of happened for me over the years, if we want to seek to cultivate harmony in the world and work for the well-being of all of the living things on the planet, then we're going to have to start with ourselves. We have to sort out our own issues. We have to create harmony inside ourselves, find the trigger points and the weak points. And, again, equally, as you're doing that work, you have to be compassionate to yourself and try to be soft and not beat yourself up and be like, come on, I've got to be harmonious. I've got to be so kind to everyone around me. I've been through that, by the way, so it doesn't work. And this is why the yoga practice gives us so many tools for sorting ourselves out. Starting with the physical practice, think about how you feel after you've done your asana, your breath, your pranayama, your meditation. You feel your nervous system is integrated, it's regulated, you feel calm, clear, and when troublesome and unexpected things happen in that lovely window right after your practice, you manage to deal with it a lot more skillfully. I'm sure you too. I mean, that's certainly my experience. And so that teaches us that if we manage to actually cultivate harmony within ourselves, it's so much easier to go and do it out in the world. It's even maybe just like the natural result of it. Donna Farhi actually says about the yama niyama that they're not even necessarily things that we strive to practice, but just the natural result of living in a yogic manner. Of Ahiṃsā, Patanjali says that when you're established in this practice, you have such an all-pervading aura of peace that others around you drop any hostility towards you. And I really love this commentary by Vachaspati. Horse and buffalo, rat and cat, snake and mongoose, and others, being natural enemies of each other, give up their animosities by following the tendencies of the mind of the revered one, the yogi established in Ahiṃsā, whose habit of not causing injury is confirmed. So it basically means that there's this lovely ripple effect of compassion. I mean, there's your karma. Again, the more you can cultivate the peace inside your own self, come into balance with yourself, then it's easier for you to be compassionate and harmonious with the people around you. And so then it's easier for all the people around you to be harmonious to you. And then they have a ripple effect and you've saved the world just by being nice to yourself. Of course, it's not that complex. And actually, we know that in order to do this, you actually have to face up to difficulty. So Ahiṃsā doesn't mean love and light, peace and love, and just like, yes, everything's so peaceful. Cultivating harmony in the world and in yourself involves being courageous and facing up to ugliness. When you're dealing with your own issues, your own stuff, you have to, sometimes it can be very uncomfortable and you have to face parts of yourself that you really didn't like. One of my favorite ways of putting it, there's a beautiful Japanese-American artist called Yumi Sakugawa who refers to having tea with your demons. And she says that if you have tea with your demons, if you invite them over for cake and do it on a regular basis, then you realize that they're not as scary and they'll give you a diamond. And what that means is that when you confront the ugliest parts of yourself, you realize that they're not horrible monsters. They're actually the result of being wounded when you were younger or something else like that. And so it then teaches you how to be compassionate with yourself. So in Patanjali Sutras, he says that if you're peaceful, then wild animals will be harmonious around you. And I've just had proof of that. You know, I attracted lovely Luna to me by being so peaceful and lovely in this video. Okay, so I think I'll probably finish there. But basically, the takeaway is this. Be kind to others because they'll be kind to you. But most of all, be kind to yourself. Om Shanti.